whatever works for you, whatever works.
Tokyo Night Parade. Can I have?
Can you have
I
what?
want to read.
Anything.
I want to read from the bookstore cat, not my poems. Isn't that cute? That's what I want to read.
Tonight you are the bookstore cat.
Okay. All right. I'll be that. So is life generally good for us? Generally.
Hi everyone, welcome.
Yeah,
Thank you
generally it
for
is.
joining us, all you bookstore cats.
You know, I've had these last
We're gonna get
these
started.
years like you, where everybody.
Excellent. Hi
died
everyone,
on
welcome.
me,
Thank you so kindly for joining
my
us.
wife,
My
my
name
mother,
is Card
my father, and my
Johnson.
sister,
I'm the event coordinator
all,
for Green
in the
Apple,
last
and tonight I
6
am
years.
very excited to welcome you to our celebration of Rusty Morrison's latest collection, Risk.
Whoa! Yeah!
Rusty is joined tonight by some real stars this evening. And as I say their names, I'd love for you to keep it going for each of them. She is joined tonight by Jennifer S. Cheng, by Dean Rader, by Maw Shein Win. And this is a special evening. Not only do we get to celebrate Rusty's work and the work of her fellow poets, but fellow poet Forrest Gander is also going to be here doing some hosting this evening. So welcome Forrest as well. Thank you for joining us both here in person and online. Hello, online audience. I'm waving to your camera if you can't see. We are broadcasting from San Francisco. We open each of our events with a land acknowledgement. And we are operating on unceded Ramaytush land, and we think that acknowledgement requires action, and so we encourage you to donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. And given that we have some pretty recent land back wins in the East Bay, it's pretty prescient and like very cool to see, if I have, for lack of a better word, it's very cool to see. And so if you want any more details about how to participate in this project of rematriation, we have some details about how to connect with the Ramaytush Land Trust at the back desk there. I'm happy to point you in that direction. I have very brief business before I hand the microphone over to our stars. Now is a good time to silence your cell phones if you haven't already. I think picture taking is okay. Is that fine? Okay, great. Picture taking is fine. Just don't take a call in the middle of the event. That's not appropriate. We're not going to do that. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com. We have a really great season ahead of us, including the event that you were currently attending. So do check out what else we have in the coming season. The restroom is behind me. It is available after the event, not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, do ask me and I will gladly tell you. We have copies of books by all of the writers joining us this evening at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you support the writers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. Thank you so kindly. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our host for the evening. And first, I know I said that this was brief. I kind of lied, so. But I will do my best, and I wanted to be thoughtful about it. So I am delighted to welcome Forrest Gander. Forrest's work discusses a number of topics, includes a number of topics, but is absolutely entwined with the natural world, made both as observer and as part of its ecology. It's hard to categorize Forrest as only a poet because he is indeed not only a poet, working in both fiction and nonfiction as well, but he does certainly bring a poetic sensibility to all of his work. His books are numerous and include, among many, Twice Alive, As a Friend, Your Nearness, the Pulitzer Prize-winning Be With, and the forthcoming I Can't Wait, Mojave Ghost. Aside from being a writer himself, he is also an enviably talented translator, having translated the work of writers such as Alejandro Pizarnik, Shuri Kido, and Pablo Neruda, among many others. A phenomenal thinker, writer, and as he has proven time and again, a very generous reader. Please join me in welcoming Forrest Gander.
Bravo. And Carr Johnson is also a writer, though like Rusty, her sort of public face is all about championing other writers. But
Interesting.
a little shout out for Carl.
Yay!
Okay, I just got the order of the readers, and we're going to start with Jennifer S. Cheng, who I last saw here in this bookstore, reading from her first book. Jennifer and I share curiously entangled connections to San Francisco State University, Brown University, and the University of Iowa, as well as to a number of other writers and artists. Her book, The Body, Again, addresses the unstable way that the self, with its pain, its past, and its joy, is nested inside the body, just as the body is nested inside the world, just as the traces of our histories are nested inside talismanic objects and in the identity of family members, nested within what we call a home.
Nice.
Which raises the question of how we keep, quote, one's insides inside, and how we navigate the world as a multiplicity of selves in a body that, quote, radiates in multiple directions. In her more recent book, this beautiful book, Moon, Letters, Maps, Poems, Moon, Letters, Maps, Poems, she further explores the relationship between body and landscape, the beloved and the other. What might it mean to inhabit oneself or one's gender as a composite of selves? And how do we inhabit or reinvent the contradictory stories and myths that, like our DNA, both accompany and compose us? Jennifer.
Beautiful.
Woo!
Wow.
Had to pull it down.
Didn't realize how terrifying and thrilling that would be. Thank you, Forrest Gander. I'm so happy to be here celebrating the work of Rusty, who is not only, I'm sure you all know, an amazing writer, but also an amazing editor and
Yes.
community member.
Yes.
Without whom I would not have my first book in the world 8 years ago. And I feel incredibly lucky and grateful to have worked with somebody who, honestly, like whose poetics is so indivisible from their spirit of being. Which I guess is just to say that Rusty is somebody who's extraordinarily generous and just so wholehearted in her commitment to poetry.
Here, here.
So I feel really, I feel really thankful. I think this is, hold on, I'm going to try to keep it from drooping. Put that one. Thank you, Car. That's good. So I thought it was only appropriate to read from the book that she helped bring
Yay!
in
I
the
love
world.
that book. Yay!
So House A is about immigrant home building, and it's about the body's experience as it's inscribed with the cosmology of home. And I'm just going to read a few poems from the first section, which are epistolary prose poems addressed to Mao Zedong. And it feels really nostalgic. Opening this, okay. Dear Mao, I want to describe for you the feeling of sleep as described by neuropsychologist Julia Tononi, who uses words like oscillations and waves, while his patient is noted to gather the phrase, the sea moving about. Elsewhere are words like sleepwalking and daydreaming, so I can only conclude that sleep is a boundary whose line is slowly eroding. Sleep, like childhood, is more of a sense than an experience we can articulate from beginning to end. As a child in Texas bathed in sun, I often fell asleep in the car, even in daytime, and my father would carry me into the house with my head pressed against his shoulder.
If my mother, who was much smaller, was the driver, she would crack open a window on warm afternoons, and I would later wake to the pleasure of utter silence and aloneness, the sun across my face. I want to emphasize to you that both responses were acts of love, and if by chance an airplane overhead excavated an echo in the sky, then I knew that I was cradled in its sound. Inside our home of secret languages, my mother boiled up a pot of salty rice porridge, and my father watched our neighbors like a devout mockingbird, straw doormats, pine reeds in the winter. So I want you to know that if sleep is an ocean, then it is because we are migrants inwardly sighing along to its many oscillations, unintimidated by factual distances, but awash in the knowledge of three: body, bodying, embodied. And if water is a metaphor, then it is because water fills up a room, slow-moving, blurry, immersive, but obscured. Strangely enough, it was not my father, but my mother who gave us history lessons, steeped in a pale, languorous liquid. We sleep where our home is, and we build a home where we sleep.
Lovely.
Dear Maw, I want to describe for you the migration pattern of birds, which has nothing to do with sleep, but which I nonetheless find beautiful. When insects sleep, they are wakened only by poetic forces like the heat of the sun or the darkness of night. The most beautiful of flying insects huddle together in sleep, but little is known about the slumbering habits of migratory birds. Birds, as far as I know, do not fear being shot down from the sky, though fear is a common warning sign for flight. Some birds, feeling their bones weighed down by air, migrate not by sky, but by swimming, their wings waving down the sea as if buoyed by its girth. Other birds are wanderers, their migratory curvatures charted like flowering seeds across the globe. Here on the earth, where bones are buried, the question remains: if the birds of history alight by a ritual of body and landscape, do they make the return out of longing, out of heartache? For it is the anthropologist who traces the longing for home between personal biography and the biography of the collective, a map that ends beyond locatable distances into mythical terrains, imaginary homelands. We do this: listen to the body, gauge its violence, take flight.
Beautiful.
And I'll just read one more.
Beautiful.
Dear Maw, behind the fog, the lake is like a well-worn sheet gathered at the edges. What does it mean, my father as a child believing he would have to lie his body still at the bottom of a boat? Dear Maw, I used to be the kind of person who accepts things as they are: ciphers hidden in the lotus cakes, lanterns set to sea in order to lure the body home, rice bundles to keep the fish from eating holes in a drowned body's limbs. Our home in the south of the island slept between the ocean on one side and on the other large, dark hills, so I could always know what it was to be at the same time cocooned and ready to arch a distance. How I would brush my teeth in the darkness, afraid of the shadow at the window, but comforted by the slopes I knew were lurking behind. Dear Maw, I never wanted my mother's body too far from my own.
Lovely.
Oh, yay! Woo. Thank you for reading from that book.
That's fuzzy.
Just got an email. It's in Chinese, but fortunately I can translate it. It's from Mao Zedong. It says, Jennifer, you blow my mind.
Bravo.
Dean, I bought a copy of this beautiful, beautiful book, Before the Borderless, by Dean Rader. And I liked it so much I ended up buying 2 more copies for friends. Dean takes the rather major risk of setting his poems beside images of Cy Twombly's paintings.
Oh.
I mean,
Ooh.
the luck of having like Dean Rader getting permission for this, but the the gumption of thinking that you could put your poetry beside Cy Twombly's paintings and not be just eviscerated, just radioactively. Most poetry, we have to admit, would disappear in such a position, and yet Dean keeps finding companionable forms, apodictic statements about seeing, epistolary, gnomic philosophical notes, questions, lyric, really sort of just pulling, like the way Heraclitus had to clean out the king's stables. He funnels all these different rivers right into the stables. That's what Dean's doing with forms, is he's like finding everything he can to address this work, which turns out to be about much more than Cy Twombly's paintings. Borrowing a trick from painting, just as Cy Twombly borrowed phrases from poets, Dean embraces white space and caesura. The poems aren't strictly ekphrastic, since they restlessly shift between Dean's descriptions to his meditations on the paintings, to his own associative personal memories, to Twombly's biography, and to his own biography. He includes on-the-page revisions and terribly tender notes to and regarding his mother. Before the Borderless is an emotionally delicate and durable collection you want to have. Beautiful. Dean.
Like, what if he could do all of our introductions? Like, how awesome would that be?
Yes, tape them.
I feel like it goes downhill from here. Thank you, Forrest. That was really lovely. And I loved hearing those poems. I'm not sure I've heard you read from that book. It made me think I'm teaching epistolary poems in my class. So my students are going to get a little Jennifer S. Cheng. It is a great honor to be celebrating Rusty's phenomenal new book. I've been reading it a lot over the past couple of weeks, and I love it. It's impossible to say it's her best, but it's really remarkable. I've loved her work for a really long time, ever since you won the Tupelo Prize.
Well, actually, the first one was The True Keeps. But anyway, never mind.
Yeah. No, I remember. That's what really hooked me was that book. It was like 2010, right?
The Tupelo Prize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love,
After Urgency.
Yeah, After Urgency. I love that book.
Thank you.
And I really just want to say a bit about Rusty and her role in the world of poetry in the Bay Area. There's no greater ambassador for poetry. Omnidon is a phenomenal press. So many great poets I don't think would be in print if it weren't for Omnidon.
True.
She and Ken really did a great service to poetry that was pushing some boundaries, that didn't necessarily have homes at other places. And they found a home, they found a family at Omnidon. Rusty has also been a really generous host for my students at the University of San Francisco. I teach an internship class every spring. You guys have hosted our students almost every year. And our students love it. They get really great experience. And this is what I mean by being an ambassador. As an editor, as a poet, as someone who trains the next generation of people in the world of publishing, I really know of no one more hands-on. Speaking of, she's a phenomenal reader of poetry. Okay. I was really lucky to publish a book with Omnidon, my second book in their chapbook series, this little book called Landscape Portrait Figure Form, which is still my wife's favorite book of mine. And that book made a best of the year list, and so it keeps coming up, and I love that book so much. And we did a lot of readings together, a lot of trips together, and no publisher supports their authors better. And let me just say, in the world of poetry, that is really saying something.
Yes.
And that book, I was thinking as Forrest was talking, in that book was the beginning of this book. It's this book that's all ekphrastic poems, all about art, mostly about Paul Klee paintings, but they're sort of trying to figure out on the page what Klee is doing. on the canvas. And so I think this book exists because of the book that Rusty published, and I still have my copies where she writes on your poems and gives you a number, and if you're in there, it's like 4 or 5 is really good, 1 or 2 is not so good. But I remember thinking, yeah, Rusty's right. I believe everything she said. So on behalf of all of us, thank you. And I'm going to start by reading one of my favorite poems from her book. We're here to celebrate Rusty. So this is beautiful. And so I'll say, I didn't really know what I was going to read of my own tonight. I was going to read from the Omnium book. I'm now glad that I brought this book because of Forrest's intro. But this poem, I felt like my poem that I'm going to read was waiting for Rusty's to come along so it could talk to it. This is called Its First Daylight and the Wrecked Possible. I hope you weren't going to read this one.
Well, if I was, I'll just not read it.
You could do the authorized version. Mine's the Napster version. Its first daylight and the wrecked possible is not yet a foregone conclusion, but you already hear what's digging for you with its long, fetching pole. Just like everybody else, you squeeze down a little deeper inside your muddy syntax, hiding some meaning here and there in soft dirt, while what's burrowing moves close. You toss the luxury of moral consequence out with collective catastrophe, like so much ground up gravel. Already the morning's gone, humid and asthmatic, but its little cough could be a friendly reminder of what comes when you mix ink and smoke. It's a great poem.
Yeah.
So the poem I'm going to read also deals with issues of catastrophe. And so it's this poem that talks to these series of really beautiful blue paintings by Twombly that hang in the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. And my sister was living in Abu Dhabi at the time. And while I was working on this poem, it was during the fires in Sonoma, and my in-laws live in Sonoma, and they had to evacuate and move in with us for a while in fear that their house was going to burn. And so this poem is sort of thinking about blueness and the sky and the sea and water and ecological catastrophe. And that last line at the end of Rusty's poem about ink and smoke figures in literally. So thank you all for coming. Congratulations, Rusty. It's called Meditation on Communication. And it's this crazy poem that goes all the way across the page with no punctuation. So we'll see how this goes. And it too is epistolary. And it's addressed to Twombly. Dear Sigh, and why wouldn't I go, like language, to where I am not? Blue scrim of sky and sea, calligraphy of memory, cataract, not illustration, but realization, rhythm, wave, cascade. Have you seen the now, Sigh? You would not, could never. The sky, sun-scorched, fire and more fire, black as a bruise, but not as soft. I think even oceans are burning or melting, everything molting from what it was to what it is going to be. Tonight, my son asked what my weird superpower would be, and I said, to walk into a painting. So why wouldn't I, Sigh, into it, you, go among the blue trace of the almost of my name, murmur of the visual, you have to me written, so why? How could I not become the blue-skinned, sea-skinned? My body, a choir of birdsong, ready to light up with the glowing wheel of alteration, so that we may see far enough ahead to go. To go. That blue, it is beyond blue. The way this life is beyond all things coming directly toward. So why not among the cataracts, lit by the light of not language, but its shadow, its shell, as though it too is burned through to bone. Go. I have driven through flame. This is not metaphor, and yet it is language. or at least its shell, its scorch. Marked, look at my skin, sigh. I am as blue as the iris behind death's black patch.
Wow.
Blue as the sky when it changes to sea. Go. I am already there.
Wow.
Woo-hoo! Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Dean.
Nice poem.
Woo!
I probably have another email this time from Side Farm.
Dear Forrest, make it stop.
No, it's like, I want your poems to be hanging with my paintings in
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi. Oh, this is interesting. I just pulled out accidentally a New Directions notebook, and I think of Omnidon as being as important and very like New Directions publishers was, except that she didn't have the fortune that that New Directions editor had, and what other major distinction? She's a better poet than James Laughlin.
No.
I mean, I really love James Laughlin and New Directions, but it's true.
No.
Maw Shein Win
Woo! Woo-hoo!
has a knockout signature style as a poet. Her poems are theatrical assemblies of unsettling juxtapositions and fragmented details. Often she'll drop away normative articles like the or in order to generate a leaner syntax, just odd enough to rivet our attention, as in her description of birthmark on forehead in shape of flame. But even while she employs modernist moves like that firm up the syntax, elsewhere she'll expand the syntax with kennings or playful Germanic conglomerate words like gold-fleck space between and smoke through rain. Words that were missing, sadly, from our own vocabularies until she birthed them.
Beautiful.
Maw's poems never shut their windows, and her inventiveness guarantees that each poem will be unpredictable, swerving right when they had a left-hand swerving right when they had a left-hand turn signal on. Why, she writes and repeats, why the hand caught in a bottle of laughter.
Oh.
Lovely.
In her latest book, my signed copy, Storage Unit for the Spirit House, Maw describes a child's sandal floating in the backwaters of Kerala. I thought that line was written for me because Kerala is where my partner Ashwini Bhatt grew up, and even when I met her, she wore only sandals. But talking with others, I found that almost everyone finds at least a line in her book that they presume was written precisely for them. Maw's pour the spirit back into our bone house.
Beautiful.
You're hired. We want Forrest to introduce us all the time. Can we just give a big shout out to Rusty all
God.
together?
Yes.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous book. If you don't have a copy, please get one. And I just want to say I'm so grateful to Rusty for being a support to poets, to our literary scene, and I just feel also so grateful for our friendship.
Yes.
So this poem is for you, Rusty.
All right.
Spirit House 4. Sibling follows sibling into forest of thorn. Girl holds stick of incense, tip aglow. 37 gnats await atop Mount Popa. volcanic relics, sister brother, blue-throated barbets, lightning clue, nest lands on soft earth, entwined vines, distant blaze, candlewick floating in bowl of oil.
Beautiful.
So I have a new book coming out on Amidon.
Yay!
Called Cussing the Thinking Jar soon, couple months or so, and I want to share a few poems. So for this book, I started writing it like basically at the beginning of lockdown, and all my excess energy went straight into writing multiple notebooks. There are just tons of them in our home, and eventually I started noticing patterns in all these multiple notebooks, and I invented a structure called a thought log, and this is one of my thought logs. Thought log. Dad knew he was going to die because he saw 2 vultures that morning. Suitcases breaking open display queen conch shells. Apparition of snapped bone trees. Pataflaffa, flam drag, triple stroke roll. The suburbs are sinking. I record my mood shifts and flares in a notebook. Floating holidays, cement memories, hot tub religion. Dream bigger than an airstream. The neurologist will return in an hour. Goat rentals for hillsides. Identify your top 3 unhelpful thinking styles. Surveillance jammer, sleeping lags, default salad, bloodline from a Burmese monarch. My dentist used a percussion test to replicate my tooth pain. Baby jumping, beetle fighting, extreme ironing, drink watermelon juice to quench your inner fire.
Wow.
So that list, baby jumping, beetle fighting, extreme ironing. So in one of my days where I was just sitting in front of my laptop, I looked up strangest hobbies. And it was fascinating. Those are strange hobbies.
Oh my God.
Okay, this is another log poem called Hyphen Log. Hyphen log. Question mark, comma, hyphen. Marks punctuated by division upon division. A leaving behind, a coming toward, a moving between. Language heard over tables, under walls. How we connect, how we do not. Flip-flops, tea shop, full stop. Burma, Myanmar. Born within a border is another border. Collision tables, brain spraying, division trains. A comma, soft pause, separates conjunctions. Shot echoes, cyclone pound, plumeria rain.
Ooh.
And it's called Observation Log. We hear chants, do their protests sound out a future we'll be able to witness. My family in Yangon no longer leaves home.
Ooh.
Most of my family is in Burma.
Wow.
So, I follow the news.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and this is entitled Thinking Jar. This is the last Thinking Jar poem I wrote, I think. Okay, the Thinking Jar. I dab viridian green on eyelids. A gnat hums. In the factory, an opera is born. On the shed, an owlet broods in shade. I knit a shawl of cadmium orange. Blizzard blue swirls as meerkats emerge. I swoon alone. Magenta sky space. I bathe in mint. A bobcat in the bush.
Mm.
Thank you. So my second to last poem is called Catalog. Check work email. Read about flooding in Puerto Rico. Put lotion on dry legs. Spectrovite vitamin bottles on dining room table. Sip warm coffee. Try to remember next PT appointment. Listen to bird songs on YouTube makes me think of the bird on yesterday's walk, my friend trying to ID with an app on her phone. The announcement by Taco Bell that their guacamole would not suffer from the impact of Mexico's dearth of avocados. Leg stretches. Where should I donate my clothes? Picture my mother alone in bed at the monastery, the abbess in her kuti sending out newsletters on compassion. Soldiers gun down village in Myanmar. Text a client 2 close-up photos of the scars on my abdomen, which I meant to send to my doctor at Kaiser.
Wow.
A thin trail of blood in one, the other shaped like a star, my navel exposed, my hand holding up my right breast.
Wow. Wow.
And my last poem, it's called Dear H. Dear H, I'm hanging out in the waiting room. I am blinking into another eye, gold shades, sirens again. Seeing the city through the window of another window, I live in a 2-second time lapse. Dear H, I stitched a quilt for you, slivers of green lint throughout. Warmth in the waiting room now, my limbs are soft with pain. Slept last night with ears open, noted the following: pollen drift, vessel crack, pillow bark. Dear H, missing your crackling eyes, generous fountains. And this, you were standing on a dock and next to you, a steamer trunk made of bone. Strangers began to gather. You sunk your hand and lifted a spinning plate from the trunk. Applause and more applause. Dear H, my cat visited me from the other world. She witnessed bliss bursting from the pockets of houses open once again. Bright light from the storehouse, tinny bell tones. She could smell the dirt from behind the shed.
Woo! Beautiful.
Well, those people who are listening who aren't here, should know that all the chairs are taken and there are people sitting on the sides, but there should be hundreds of people in here for what Rusty has achieved in making community.
Yes.
And she shouldn't ever need a car, because there should be like a bunch of big-shouldered women and men
Yes.
carrying her around wherever she wants to go.
Yes.
Decades ago, before I ever met Rusty, I chose her book Weathering for the Colorado Prize, 2004, saying that in agile lines that canyon open, exposing an unfashionable, edgy sinceritas, Rusty Morrison explores the intertwining of life and language in quiet, gorgeous meditations inflected by barn swallows.
Wow.
Weathering leads us into a shapely attentiveness to those particular others, human, animal, and vegetable, that situate our affectual and perceptual experience and call us to find our way again outside the one thing. With trenchant political and philosophical repercussions, Morrison's poems cut through the constraints of systemic thought to articulate gestural meanings, powerful rivulets of suggestion, and sensibility that reopen the world and wound of being. Which goes to show how of one body her work has been. how she came into her voice and what she needed to write early on, and has continued to work it in a way that's made her, for me, I really think, one of the most under-recognized great poets of our generation. That sinceritas that I mentioned in that first book, Morrison's insistence that irony rarely reaches down to the heart of things, defines every book Morrison has written. My experience and the experience of others reading After Urgency or Beyond the Chain Link, for instance, is an immediate recognition of substance. Here is a writer who believes there are important things to consider in poetry and who isn't afraid of focusing on them. She is, to wit, a serious poet, not primarily an entertainer, like, say, fill in your blank. To read her is to know you've encountered the real thing.
Yes.
Partly the real thing is thematic. Empathy, the environmental crisis, grief, the body and the way it metabolizes experience, political and familial trauma. She has a philosophical bent and could be described as a phenomenological writer, but her conceptual concerns are always grounded in the personal. At the same time, that real thing quality of her work has to do with its technical prowess, with the risks, the innovations, her ear, the qualities that make poetry art. Sound patterns flower subtly in her poems. Incident is followed by the incidental, by itinerary, already itinerant, input, etc., hearing those slant rhymes, gathering sequences of words. Such frequent but not constant concentrated moments of echo and counterpoint in her work create a pulsing physical tension, like the contraction and release of a snake's muscles as it winds between rocks. At the same time, in any single poem, Morrison has that Rilkean capacity to toggle between thoughtfulness and feeling, between mind and world. Although she has a style that is recognizably her own, each of her books, including Risk, her newest.
Oh, it's right there.
This is it. There are actually copies for you at the desk. What was I saying? Each of her books, including Risk, her newest, is utterly singular. She doesn't repeat herself. At this moment in Rusty's life, at the peak of her excellence as a writer and as an editor, Rusty reminds me a bit of Robert Creeley when he was writing the poems of For Love, struggling to make a living and editing diverse press for Mallorca. And by now, like Creeley, Rusty has, I believe, solidified her reputation as a major American poet.
Thank you so much.
Oh, God.
Jesus.
Oh, God.
Gorgeous.
Yes, you've been with me from the beginning. Shows my first book.
Don't trip.
Wobble, wobble. It's wonderful to be here with all of you and to hear so many amazing things about my work, about my poetry, and about the very important work of bringing good writing, powerful writing, unexpectedly surprising writing to others through Omnidon, which is something that is my avocation, and I hope that I can keep doing it till I drop dead, which I hope will be a long time from now. And I miss Ken terribly, and this is his legacy with me. And my new, not new, over the last few years, co-publisher Laura Joachimson, who's in Seattle right now, or should be here. I just feel very porous at the moment, and so grateful to all of you. Carr, thank you so much for having us here. Forrest, Jennifer, Maw, Dean, and all of the new people I've met tonight and who I hope to meet. Steve, it's good to have you here, and Tom, Maw's partner in crime. Just to say a word about, I just like to read from paper, but so these poems mostly look like this, which are 7-syllable segments with a break, and then another 7-syllable segment. And I wanted to find a way to write into my experience of how I either limit myself or life limits me, and which is it? So writing into a controlled form made me think about what is actually happening to me in that moment. And the form would not let me simply write what I wanted to say, because I would not break a word mid-space, in between the syllables. So constantly I was revising until it felt as though the poem was revising me rather than I was revising the poem. And that is a truly amazing feeling, to feel the poem living me, not me living the poem. So most of them are like that. There are also poems called Narrow Negotiations that look like, come on. They're all hiding right now.
They're in there.
They're in there, I know they are. There's one. Ha! Gotcha. So they look like this, and these were even more difficult to write because they all were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 couplets. So there are 14 lines, and there are 7 syllables in each line. And if I thought the other ones were difficult, these just simply took sometimes weeks to finish, but they were, when they finished themselves, I was enormously relieved each time, and then I'd have to start up again, but I'd take a break. Anyway, so I'll read some poems. A caterpillar. Here's a caterpillar on the beach where you walk, a long way from shrubs. How did it crawl so far? You carry it back from the waves and gently pitch it toward wild grass. Haven't you been waiting for a hand to pick you up, toss you into a future that would be soft, welcoming? Last night's storm tossed a bare branch onto your porch. Its 3 limbs were all pointing together toward nothing, but you wanted to ask it how to go to nothing. You listened deep in the hollow at the core of the branch's quiet for an answer. How far down will it let you travel before it is too narrow? Some silence stays wide. You watched for a long time after your mother's silent mouth fell open at death. It called to you with its quiet, but you wouldn't answer. Now you carry that refusal in everything you don't say to anyone, and especially what you don't tell yourself. So now negotiations number 4. Pine needles dead on the limb blur as wind shivers them loose from their outlines for a split instant, then each snaps back. Wind is a workshop of freedoms that only intuition turned kaleidoscopic can perceive. What is it you've been dead to that is within yourself? Your outline is breathing. Look, see a world of new lives form, the death in you fertilized to let each instant you live riot with new frequencies. Look to your right. As you drive the freeway this morning, roll down all your windows. The wind isn't sentient. Still, the wind does feel alive, awake to its release of air, its breathing. From it comes a release of your own. Pent up tics and frayed nerves. How many hours, even days, have you been holding your breath? Have you been avoiding breathing? Hasn't it been a defiance of living that you've not let yourself see harms only you? Even if it somehow seemed to become a mastery, a skill. Here now, driving to work, parking the car, breathe out the child you no longer need to be, that child you were so frightened, so alone. Your mother used to make you come with her in the car. She was always driving the highways, not heading to anywhere. You in the passenger seat, eyes turned away from her as much as she'd allow that freedom to an elsewhere that adulthood would someday offer you. How sure you were then that if you were behind the wheel, you'd know exactly where to go, all the places you thought a road could take you. Narrow negotiations. You lie under the covers, the window wide for any breeze, better than sleep to be deep in night's tall grass.
Nice.
Silence isn't ruined, but advanced by frog's guttural echo of your forgotten desire to be an animal made permeable by the sounds outside of what ears apprehend.
Yes.
The noise when sentience rips through night's starless cover that shifts what the next day will be. The frog hears it, and he comes investigating. I love frogs better. As a concept, not as...
No,
keep them.
the real frog in your backyard. What do you mean?
Please don't send frogs. No wild poppies in your weeds. Exhaust yourself waiting and watching for even one, a kind of watching that's like lying down in what should be a margin between you and death. You believe death is a long way on the far side of growing things. But you need to watch the soil. How volunteer seedlings of foxgloves only grow where other plants have died. Every plant needs death to eat, or it will starve. Starving is the only option some have. You try the latest hair gel in order to stiffen up against worse damage you might do to yourself. But stiff hair will seed in itself harm that advertisements won't admit, denying how easily brittle fears will break you if you let them. You spend every spare hour watching from your window, not letting yourself know what you're waiting for. Then you glimpse an orange color. It's one wild poppy, then another. All are holding the echo of sunrise, chiming a pale luminescence, even hours into the afternoon's heat. A mind can wait for a decade for a color that it had never let itself recognize to bloom within it.
Lovely.
You watched as your friend lived wildly into her death in ways she'd never have lived her whole lifetime. Will you let yourself wait that long? Narrow negotiations. A chaff of today's news cycle, but you'd meant to type chafe, not chaff. Walk into this sudden field of husks, You have work to do. Winnow away the thick husk of your expected direction. Find her eyes. A woman last month who sat down in the BART seat across from you. Her bloodshot eyes were chaos. Your chaos is still as bloodshot too. Memory is a fertile field of your archived emergencies. Watch her, watch no one, which is you. Another poppy poem. I have a wild backyard that I try not to look at too closely. And I'm always looking for poppies because then I can say, well, I'm not cutting the weeds down because of those poppies. And I keep waiting. Occasionally one arrives. You rub the just picked poppy petal between thumb and first finger until orange is your prisoner. It's just like squeezing yourself between one political act and the next. You leave just trace color, hard even to recognize as an adaptation you once thought would breed safety. But a compressed petal is not pretty. Is pressure really your ally? Does exerting force always put you in charge? You have sex under tight sheets just to feel how skin is such a thin containment for what's dispossessed inside you, as the sheets too easily give way. Orphaned in air, sometimes you close your eyes and spit over the side of the world, any world. Open them and see there's a dampness on your lover's face, residue of hot tears that he won't wipe away. The air thick with steam. It's a mirror of what bodies are, just heat and surrender.
Oh my God.
You are excess, but you don't know it. Will you feel it when you turn into pure static, sweetly pungent as heated tar? One more. We'll end with a narrow negotiation. It seems a risk to recall that you dreamt of a drumbeat in a fresh burial ground. The rhythm was a kind of receptor. But what was it that you wanted to receive? Birds use receptors to find holes in the sky so as to vanish from the present to the past and find a safer way home. Gnats spin holes in air and slip through to where they just were. How much better if you could live each instant as if it was already behind you. Thank you.
We have one more hand for Rusty. Congratulations, Rusty.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Oh my God.
Thank you for letting us celebrate with you. And can we give another hand to all of the poets?
Yes, yes, yes.
Forrest Gander. Thank you all so much. This is a total pleasure. I am so lucky to live in the Bay Area with such talented people, and we really are. And thank you all for being here and celebrating this work.
Thank you, Carl. Woo!
Very elegant.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. We have copies of books by all of our poets at the front register.
Great.
You can find them there. I'm sure they would be happy to sign a book if you ask them politely. If you have any questions, do ask me. And if not, congratulations again, Rusty. And
Thank
we'll
you.
see you next time. Thank
Sweet.
you so much.
Thank you. Woo. Thank you.
Sweet. Sweet. Gorgeous.
Yay! It was such fun.
Beautiful.
Already, we should get all of our readers to.
Okay, sure. Oh my God.
Wow.
That was so, thank you. Thank you.
Wasn't it
Oh my God, it was wonderful. Nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you.